Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
It was the summer of 2007, and 13-year-old Rachel was having a birthday sleepover at her house in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio. She had invited 5 friends: Maddie, Lexi, Brianna, Tori, and Jasmine. The evening started off like any other middle school sleepover: junk food, scary movies, and gossip whispered under the glow of fairy lights in her basement. Around midnight, when the power flickered briefly and the lights dimmed, they all screamed and laughed, brushing it off as the perfect spooky moment. But when the lights came back on, Maddie swore she saw someone standing outside the basement window. The girls teased her for being scared, even though they all silently admitted the windows creeped them out, especially at night. They were narrow and close to the ground, just above the lawn, offering an eerie view of the dark backyard. At 1:17 a.m., the first strange thing happened. Jasmine's phone started ringing, no caller ID. When she answered, all she heard was heavy breathing. She hung up, unnerved, but the phone rang again less than a minute later. This time, no one picked up. Instead, Rachel joked that it was probably a prank from her older brother upstairs. But her brother had left earlier that evening to stay at a friend's house. That's when Brianna noticed something odd. Her overnight bag had been unzipped and rifled through. At first, she assumed one of the girls was messing with her, but none of them admitted to it. Then Lexi realized her shoes were missing from the pile they left near the door. The basement door leading upstairs was still locked, and none of the girls had gone outside. Trying to keep things light, Rachel suggested they do something silly to distract themselves, maybe play the old mirror game, Bloody Mary. Tori, the bravest of the group, agreed. They turned off the basement lights except for a small candle and took turns staring into the mirror in the bathroom that branched off the main room. Tori went first. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. Nothing happened. She turned and grinned, clearly unfazed. Then Maddie went next. Same chant, same silence. She giggled nervously as she turned around. Then Lexi stepped in and shut the door behind her. She was in there longer than the others, not responding when the girls started knocking, asking if she was okay. When she finally opened the door, her face was pale and she looked completely blank. She didn't say anything, just walked past everyone and sat on the couch, hugging her knees, eyes glassy. Lexi? Rachel asked, touching her arm. Lexi flinched violently and whispered, "He was behind me in the mirror." The room fell quiet. Even the laughter and whispering stopped. No one moved. "What do you mean?" Tori asked, trying to sound braver than she felt. Lexi didn't answer. She just started crying silently. They decided to sleep with the lights on after that. The candle was still flickering in the bathroom, casting weird shadows. Eventually, one by one, the girls drifted off, all except Rachel. At around 3:11 a.m., Rachel heard the faint creak of the basement stairs. She sat up, heart pounding. Everyone else was asleep, curled up in their sleeping bags. The basement door at the top of the stairs remained closed. Then she heard it again, a soft footstep, followed by another. It wasn't one of the girls. Frozen in place, Rachel watched as a shadow passed the frosted glass window of the basement door. Someone was up there. She wanted to scream but didn't want to wake the others. Maybe she imagined it. Maybe it was the house settling. Maybe the doorknob turned. Not all the way. Just a slight, careful movement as though someone were testing it. Rachel grabbed her phone and quietly texted her mom, who was to be asleep upstairs. "Are you awake? Someone's at the door." No response. Then Lexi suddenly sat up, eyes wide. "He's here," she whispered. "He came through the mirror." The doorknob rattled harder. The sound finally woke the others. Jasmine screamed. Tori bolted upright. Brianna scrambled for her phone, calling 911 in a panic. The girls huddled together, too afraid to even run up the stairs. They heard the unmistakable sound of the lock clicking. Just as the door slowly creaked open, the lights in the basement flickered, and then the power went out completely. They were plunged into darkness. A moment later, a flashlight beam appeared, sweeping across the room. The outline of a man stood in the doorway. Thin, tall, his head tilted unnaturally to the side. They screamed. But then, blinding light flooded the basement. Rachel's mom stood behind the man with a baseball bat in her hand, yelling, "Get out!" The man bolted up the stairs. The front door slammed. Cops arrived 20 minutes later. They never found the man. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, nothing. But when they checked the security footage from the house across the street, they saw something chilling. The man had been watching the house for hours. He appeared around 9 p.m., before they even started the mirror game. Just standing in the backyard, occasionally crawling toward the basement windows, lying flat in the grass, waiting, watching. They never found out who he was. And Lexi? She never came back to Rachel's house again. She wouldn't talk about what she saw in the mirror that night. But sometimes Rachel still dreams about him. The man with the twisted neck, standing in the reflection, smiling.
Story number 2.
It started as an innocent idea. Just a few close friends gathering for a weekend sleepover at Emma's old family house on the outskirts of town. The house had been empty for years, a place everyone in the neighborhood whispered about, but no one dared to enter. Emma's parents had passed away suddenly, and the house was left to her, locked up and untouched. The thrill of exploring it at night, away from the watchful eyes of parents, was too tempting to resist. That first evening, the group arrived just as the sun was dipping below the horizon. The house looked like something straight out of a nightmare. Peeling wallpaper, creaking floors, and windows coated with years of grime. Inside, the air smelled thick and stale, like the house had been holding its breath for decades. Still, the friends joked and laughed, trying to shake off the eerie feeling that clung to every corner. As night deepened, they gathered in the living room around a flickering candle, daring each other to share ghost stories. Emma pulled out an old photo album she found on the dusty shelf. The pictures were strange, black and white images of people Emma didn't recognize, all with eyes scratched out. One photo showed a little girl holding what looked like a doll, but the doll's face was completely smudged. The friends exchanged uneasy glances. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died. The house was swallowed by darkness, except for the candle's weak glow. They heard it then, a faint whisper coming from upstairs. At first, they told themselves it was the wind or the house settling, but the whisper grew louder, more distinct, a low, repetitive chant that sent chills crawling down their spines. Emma, feeling brave, grabbed a flashlight and volunteered to check it out. The beam cut through the dark hallway leading to the bedrooms, illuminating peeling paint and old portraits that seemed to watch her every step. The chanting grew louder, now a haunting melody that twisted her stomach in knots. She reached the master bedroom and pushed the door open. Inside was nothing but an empty room, except for a small box resting on the floor in the corner. Emma knelt and opened it. Inside was a diary, its pages yellowed and brittle. As she read, the words revealed a sinister secret. The house's previous occupants had practiced dark rituals to trap the souls of children who stayed overnight, feeding on their fear to stay alive. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her. The flashlight flickered and died. The chanting rose to a scream. Back downstairs, her friends heard Emma's muffled cries and pounding on the door. Panic erupted, and they scrambled to find a way up. But the house wasn't done with them. Doors slammed shut one by one, trapping them in separate rooms. Shadows twisted and slithered across the walls. The friends could hear each other screaming but couldn't reach one another. Phones had no signal, and every attempt to open a door met a cold resistance. Hours passed like minutes, and slowly the reality set in. The house was alive, feeding off their terror, just like the diary warned. One by one, the friends vanished. The last one left, trembling in the darkness, felt cold fingers brush their neck, and heard a voice whisper from the shadows, "Stay with us forever." When the police finally broke into the house days later, all they found was the diary, sitting open on the dusty floor, and the faint echoes of whispered voices that never left the walls. Emma and her friends were never seen again. And the house, it still waits, patient and hungry, for the next sleepover to begin.
Story number 3.
It was supposed to be just a normal sleepover. 4 close friends, a Friday night, and nothing but popcorn, movies, and laughter ahead. Emily, Sarah, Mia, and Jenna had been planning it for weeks, excited to escape their parents' rules and dive into the carefree world of teenage fun. The house was old but cozy, tucked away in the woods just outside their small town. The perfect place to feel like they were alone in the world. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the friends gathered in the living room, blankets and pillows strewn across the floor. They watched horror movies, telling jokes, and daring each other to go outside for a breath of fresh air. When midnight approached, the flickering candlelight and the storm that had begun outside set a perfect, eerie atmosphere. The wind howled through the trees, and the occasional crack of thunder made their laughter nervous, but still excited. Then it began. Strange things that no one could explain. Mia was the first to notice the whispers. At first, they were faint, barely audible over the storm and the movie soundtrack. She paused the film and looked around, but the others just shrugged it off, blaming the wind or their imagination. But the whispers kept growing louder, and soon the voices seemed to come from the walls themselves. "Did you guys hear that?" Mia asked, her voice trembling. Emily nodded slowly, clutching her blanket tighter. "Yeah, like someone's whispering just outside the window." Jenna laughed nervously. "It's probably just some prank or maybe animals." They tried to laugh it off, but none of them could shake the creeping feeling that something was very wrong. Minutes later, the lights flickered, then died completely, plunging the room into darkness. Panic crept into the group as the storm raged harder, rain pounding the windows like heavy fists. They fumbled for their phones, only to find the batteries mysteriously drained. No signal, no flashlight. Sarah suggested they stick together and try to find candles. As they moved cautiously down the hallway, the whispers followed, now clearer, urgent, and full of desperate pleading. The words were impossible to make out, but the tone was unmistakably angry and sad. In the basement door, the temperature dropped sharply. The friends huddled, but before they could decide what to do, the door creaked open by itself. An unbearable stench filled the air, a mixture of decay and something metallic. Then they saw it, scratches, deep and fresh, carved into the wood of the doorframe. Not random marks, but letters, spelling out one word: stay. Frozen in fear, Jenna reached out to touch the doorframe. The instant her fingers brushed the wood, a cold hand grabbed her wrist, hard. She screamed, but when the others turned, no one was there. Jenna was pale, eyes wide with terror. "We need to get out," Emily whispered, voice shaking. They rushed back to the living room, only to find the front door locked tight. No matter how hard they pushed or pulled, it wouldn't budge. The windows were fogged over, and behind the mist, shadowy figures seemed to move just beyond the glass, watching. Then the lights flickered back on for a split second, revealing the room rearranged. The furniture was upended, and written on the walls in what looked like dried blood was a chilling message: "You can never leave." The storm finally subsided, and morning light crept through the curtains, but the door still refused to open. Trapped, the girls sat together in stunned silence, their earlier laughter completely gone. Hours later, the parents arrived, breaking down the door. Inside, the house was empty, except for 4 blankets on the floor. The girls were gone without a trace. No one ever found out what happened that night. The house was abandoned soon after, left to rot in the woods, whispered about as cursed. Some say if you stand outside on a stormy night and listen carefully, you can still hear the desperate whispers and a voice begging for help. Don't stay.
Story number 4.
It started as a typical Friday night sleepover. A group of 5 friends, Emma, Jake, Sarah, Mark, and Lily, gathered in Emma's basement for a night full of movies, snacks, and laughter. The house was old, with creaky wooden floors and faded wallpaper, but none of them cared. They were teenagers, and this was just another chance to hang out away from parents and responsibility. As the night deepened, they decided to tell scary stories, trying to outdo each other with tales of ghosts, serial killers, and urban legends. Emma suggested they turn off all the lights and tell the scariest story they could think of. Reluctantly, the others agreed, and the basement plunged into darkness, except for the flickering glow of a single candle in the center. Jake started first, weaving a tale about a shadowy figure that haunted abandoned buildings. The story sent shivers down their spines, but they laughed nervously, daring each other to keep going. Then Sarah shared a story about a lost child who whispered secrets in the dark, and Mark told a chilling account of a creature that could mimic voices to lure people into the woods. When it was Lily's turn, she hesitated. Her voice was barely above a whisper as she described a sleepover she once heard about. a sleepover where none of the kids ever woke up. According to the story, the house was cursed, and anyone who slept there was trapped in an endless nightmare, unable to escape even in death. The friends scoffed, but Lily's expression was serious, her eyes flicking to the corners of the basement as if expecting something to appear. Emma, feeling brave, challenged Lily to tell the story again, but this time with the lights off completely. The others agreed, and Emma blew out the candle. Now, in total darkness, Lily's voice trembled as she retold the story, describing how the cursed house would make you dream the worst horrors imaginable, visions so vivid they could drive you mad. She said the only way to avoid it was never to fall asleep, but the curse made sleep irresistible, pulling victims into its grasp like quicksand. Suddenly, a cold draft swept through the basement. The friends shivered, though no windows or doors were open. Then, one by one, their phones lost signal. The basement was eerily silent except for their breathing. They joked nervously that it was all part of the story's effect, but Emma felt something pressing against her skin, a faint but persistent tapping, like fingernails raking lightly across the wood behind them. Jake, trying to break the tension, decided to check the hallway light switch. As he stood up, the basement door slammed shut with a deafening bang. They all froze. Jake tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic started to build. Lily whispered, "It's the curse." The others looked at her, half scared, half angry. "It's just the house settling," Emma said, but her voice shook. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. No one knew. Then they heard it, a soft, dragging sound coming from the corner where the boxes and old furniture sat. Something moved in the dark, slow and deliberate. "Who's there?" Sarah's voice cracked. The dragging grew louder, closer. Emma fumbled for her phone, only to find it dead. No signal, no flashlight. The candle, extinguished. Mark, in a desperate attempt, shouted for whoever was there to stop. Silence. Then a low whisper came, too faint to make out but close enough to send icy needles down their spines. Suddenly, the candle flared to life on its own, casting jagged shadows across the walls. In the corner, something stood, a tall, thin figure with impossibly long fingers, its face a blur of shifting darkness. It moved with jerky, unnatural motions, its head twisting to watch each of them. Emma screamed, pounding on the door. The others scrambled, but the figure advanced, dragging itself across the floor, leaving behind a trail of icy cold that burned their skin. Lily collapsed to the floor, clutching her head, muttering, "Don't sleep, don't sleep." One by one, their eyes fluttered shut, even though they fought against it. The basement's walls seemed to close in, the darkness thickening until it felt like they were drowning in it. Emma's last thought before unconsciousness took her was of a nightmare so real it was impossible to distinguish from waking life. A nightmare where the figure whispered secrets about their deaths, where they were trapped forever in that basement. Sleep eternal. The next morning, Emma's parents found the basement door unlocked. The candle burned down to a stub, but the friends were gone. No sign of struggle, no trace of them anywhere. Just the faint sound of scratching behind the walls, like nails desperately trying to claw their way out. The police found nothing, and the house was abandoned soon after. No one dared enter the basement again. And to this day, those who live near the old house say that on quiet nights, if you listen closely, you can hear faint whispers from the basement, voices begging not to be forgotten, trapped forever in the nightmare of that disturbing sleepover.